Hello and welcome to another brand new episode of Treading Warm Water, a very proud part of the Bethel Clarion podcast network. For those of you following along at home, you will notice I did that in my first try. I'm joined today by co-host Joe Hiti and also by the tri-host, Zach Walker.
Wow. I'm honored. This is the second episode we've recorded today, and I've been called try. Well, Joe called me. I'm like trying out for the tri-host. But
you made fun of Josh. You made fun of Josh so well the last episode that you get tri-host. And I'm not.
I made it. Boom! I made it. Thank you,
Joe Hiti. You've got the floor.
So my take is that people that stand up right when an airplane lands, or that go right to the entrance of where the bags come out for the baggage carousel, are the worst people, and they should not be allowed to fly.
Oh, you bumped that one up. You said that one before, and you just said the can't be allowed to fly, but now you're just insulting them as human beings. And they're the worst. They're the worst. His take is that they're the worst people in the world. They're the worst.
When I fly coach. I never get to fly first class. I'm not bougie enough. So the rare vacation we take, like I never get to fly. I always am like middle of the plane to back of the plane, and I'm a bigger guy. I'm 6'3". So I hate having to sit on the inside. So I usually get the aisle seat just because I can't fit otherwise. Like my knees get crunched by the 4-year-old that's reclining their seat in front of me, which is another take. We'll get into that one another day. But it's so irritating when the two people next to me stand up right away as soon as we get to the gate. I'm like, there's 14 rows of people that have to get their luggage slowly, get their children, collect all their stuff, and leave. Why are you standing and putting your crotch right in my face? Because I don't want to see that. Nobody wants to see that. So those people just shouldn't be allowed to fly. They're the worst. I can't stand them. Even worse are the people that like run up the aisle, like as soon as the plane lands, because they have to get out first. It's going to be 5 minutes. Just relax. Like you sat through a 3-hour flight. You can wait an extra 5 to 10 minutes to get off in an orderly fashion.
I think I agree with this. Maybe not quite to the extent. I think there are people in the world who are worse than the people who do this in airplanes. But I do think that like the people who start lining up like at the gate, like well before it's time to go. It's like they call section 1 and section 4 starts lining up, and you're like, okay, why are you doing this? Stop.
Oh, you're talking to board the plane.
Board the plane, getting off the plane, getting your luggage after the plane. It's all disrespectful. Impatient flyers are the worst kind of flyers because we all know it's going to take a while anyways, and there's nothing we can do about that.
It just makes him.
I feel like those people have only ever seen like TV shows about flying. They've never actually flown. So in their mind, everybody's getting left behind because they weren't there in time. Like it's Ross racing to get Rachel as the plane's phalanges aren't working. Shout out to Friends if anybody watches that show.
That's I feel like bad show.
I feel like that's everybody's mindset is like they're gonna get left. So they create a rush and a panic, which makes everybody else rush and panic, which makes my dad angry. And then I have to go stand up for 15 minutes to wait in a line that should take 2 minutes if we just stood up when we had to.
That's an interesting point you bring up because I've flown quite a bit. And I my first flight was when I was like 6 months old or something because my parents went on some sort of vacation and we moved back from Alaska or something.
Ooh,
and and whenever I fly, I'm kind of relaxed, but like for some reason, at some point in the airport experience, I always think that I have left my 6-year-old son back at home. And I have the rest of my family there, and we're like gonna go on a Christmas vacation. But my son is at home, and we forgot him. And then it's crazy because every time that happens, I have to go home because I think my son is there. And I go home, and the house is just trashed, and there's like dead burglars in the house, and my son is like shaving, and it's wild. And that's what happens to me every time I fly.
I'm kind of similar, but I get this panic where I feel like pigeons are going to fly through the engine of my plane at like 8,000 feet. And then Tom Hanks is just going to show
geese.
up. Sorry, geese. And then Tom Hanks is going to show up out of nowhere and land the plane on the Hudson. Like, I'll be taking off in Colorado Springs, and I'm like, oh my God, we're going to land this plane on the Hudson. But then it just doesn't happen. So I feel the same way. I'm just like worried Sully is going to appear.
Well, I personally have a rule that I do not fly in any plane that will not land in the Hudson. Every plane I fly has to land in the Hudson, or else I'm not flying in it.
See, I don't have your guys' kinds of anxieties when it comes to being on the plane, but usually when I get on a plane and I see a very young-looking Sam Jackson, I really get worried about snakes. Like really, like I am very much scared of them. And whenever I see young Sam Jackson on my plane, I know there are going to be too many snakes on that plane.
Way too many. What's the perfect amount of snakes on the plane?
0.
Is it 0? Okay. I feel like a couple would spice things up. Hey, here's something. What if they had a couple of snakes on the plane and they were really well trained and they would bite anyone who stood up right when the plane landed?
I think that's great. I think it's a fantastic idea.
I think that's how they have to do it.
You're sticking me between a rock and a hard place there, though, because I'm so scared of snakes that I will need to get off that plane as soon as I can, but I will have to find a way to not get up right away, even though I know there are snakes on patrol. I don't know if I'll be able to do it.
You know, one thing that always irritates me and like bugs me too is seeing Denzel Washington show up to fly my plane blacked out drunk. And then just thinking about how the plane is going to be doing like a tilting motion to land. What a weird flight.
But isn't it weird in those kind of flights that you think that like your flight experience is going to be this like cool flight experience where you're seeing this pilot like do a cool thing, but instead you just have to spend 2 hours in a cabin alone with depressed Denzel Washington?
Yeah.
Because that always makes me mad.
You know what's actually like back to like a real thing. I think it was Abby Pouts, Zach Walker's co-host on Life Is, that had told me this, but there's something about the way they tell you to sit when the plane is going down so that it will instantly kill you, but that it preserves like your teeth so they can identify who you are. Like there was some rumor that was circulating that that's like what airplanes did, so that if somebody like were to go down, nobody would survive and be able to sue the airline or like would have like a horrible death. So if they sit with their head between their legs, it'll preserve their dental records, and then they'll just be killed instantly because their neck will snap.
I have not believed anything less in my entire life.
Seriously, like search it though. Like there's like a bunch of evidence like proving that it's true.
Okay, so the way I think about plane crashes is I think back to that time when Brad Pitt was escaping Israel after a bunch of infected zombies started infiltrating the city. And that plane went down because somehow these zombies got onto the airplane. But Brad Pitt just put his seatbelt on and he survived. You know, he was in a window seat, so I always try to go for the window seat and I make sure my seatbelt's on. And I mean, all I would have to survive then is a giant metal spike through my abdomen. And at that point, like, I feel like if I got out of the plane crash with just that big piece of shrapnel in me, I feel like I'm okay. So I don't know if I subscribe to your seat theory here, because, I mean, Brad Pitt got through it when there was the zombie outbreak.
That's a good point. You know, I also like to think about the time that planes had eyes and they could talk. I never saw that movie, but it's a spin-off of the movie Cars, and I really like Lightning McQueen, so ka-chow.
Is it a spin-off? I don't think it's a spin-off of the movie Cars, because it's not Pixar.
I think it's in the same universe.
How are they able to do that?
If it's not Pixar, whoever did it is definitely going to get sued.
So, Joe, I am looking at lifehacker.com.
Yeah, Planes is Disney. Planes is from Disney. And if you guys, I know we all love Lightning McQueen on this podcast. We're very strong fans, but If you don't put some respect on Dusty Crophopper's name here, I quit.
That's not his name. That can't be his name. Really?
Yeah. Let me present.
Dusty Crophopper.
Yeah.
What a great name.
If you guys can see here from the movie Cars.
Planes. Planes. You just said Cars.
Oh, sorry, Planes. Sorry, I was getting distracted. Could you guys see my screen? My Hangout is trying to crash itself.
Yeah, we can see it.
This here is Dusty Crophopper, and then this is him again in Planes 2: Fire and Rescue, which I actually saw in theaters. And so what happens to Dusty is he gets into a crash, but he survives because people can survive plane crashes, just like we told you with Brad Pitt. And then he becomes a fire plane and joins this fire and rescue crew. But we don't have to talk about the back half of that second movie. It was pretty boring. Like to the point where it's like Planes was my 8-year-old cousin's favorite thing in the world at that point. And in the middle of Planes 2, he turned to me and said, "This movie is boring." So
that is sad.
Is Planes 1 about racing?
Oh yeah, of course.
About the high risk world of plane racing?
Yeah.
Weird movie concept.
You know what like really frightens me about Planes though? I always feel like Harrison Ford is going to be elected president, and then all of a sudden these terrorists are going to take over Air Force One, and Harrison Ford is going to have to set up a zip line between another plane and his plane and send all of the crew one by one, and I'm going to be one of the crew. That always just terrifies me for some reason.
Yeah, that does scare me about planes in general.
I also get worried about planes in general if some mutant guy working for the Mandarin gets on board the plane, and like, what if Iron Man isn't there to save everybody? You know, what if he isn't there to make like the ring of safety flying down? Another thing with planes is I always feel like you should never eat the fish on planes. I just feel like that food poisoning is a big issue, and like, you know, like you might have to like have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar start taking over flying the plane, and a lot of other really disorganized things might happen, like just during that flight if you guys have fish on your flight.
As long as Nick Cage isn't on my flight, I'm okay. I just don't want Nick Cage there, and you know that's okay with me. People don't need to stand up. They don't need to wait for their luggage. Nick Cage should not be allowed to fly, especially with like a super long haircut. Yeah, I guess that's just kind of my point. Let's go around and see where everybody's sitting on this whole planes take. Zach Walker, where are you at?
I'm still processing Dusty Crophopper in my mind and how that is a protagonist name. So that's I forgot about the take, and I'm just thinking about my boy Dusty right now.
Josh Towner.
You know, I agree with you that there are a lot of terrible people when it comes to flying. I want to just real quick as my last words here, I want to circle back to the Nick Cage thing. I also don't think that he should be flying a plane with a much more normal haircut, something more similar to mine, because it might turn out to be the first movie in a never-to-be-continued series about Left Behind, which is, about the rapture. So I feel like maybe doesn't matter the haircut. Let's just keep Nick Cage's hands off the joysticks flying the plane.
I'll end with this. Don't recline your seat on somebody who's taller than 6 feet. Always ask. It's not your right to invade somebody else's space. You don't want to sit in somebody's lap. That's rude. That is a whole discussion that there are like articles on like, is it your right to like move your seat back? And it's based on, there's a thing that you can buy that like locks the seat in front of you from going back, and like which one of those are ethical, but we can talk about that later. Continue. I'm gonna need you to Amazon Prime that to me so that I can use it for my next excursion once quarantine's over. But yeah, I just think don't rush through life. Don't rush through planes. Enjoy the experience. It's terrible. We all know it's terrible. We all enjoy hating the people in first class because they have that little bit of extra room and they don't have to sit by 3 people. They only have to sit by 2. So yeah, that's just kind of where I'll end it. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Treading Warm Water. whether it be on iTunes, Spotify, or YouTube. We appreciate your support. Stay healthy. We'll catch you guys on the next one.